she was born blind and unwanted. Her father considered her a burden from the beginning, until he sold her to a mysterious millionaire. That first night, everything changed. The unfamiliar house, the cameras, the silence and cold disguised as care. But what happened next shocked everyone. Subscribe and tell me in the comments what city you're from. The days in the southern town bled together in the thick, oppressive heat, where the air clung to skin like oil and the ground cracked under the weight of its own dryness. The house Aisha lived in was barely standing, more a husk of something that had once sheltered a family than a home. The front door hung crooked on rusted hinges, and every time the wind blew, it groaned as if in protest. Windows were covered with warped plywood, and the floor inside sagged in places, full of holes where rodents scurried through at night. The walls, marked by years of neglect and nicotine stains, offered no comfort, no hint of warmth. Aisha had lived in this house her entire life. She had never seen it, not in the way others could. Blind from birth, she had only ever experienced the world through touch, scent, sound, and the subtle shifts in temperature and pressure that meant someone was near. The house smelled of mildew, cheap alcohol, and old sweat. She could feel its sadness in the creaking of the boards beneath her feet, in the cold draft that slipped through the broken seams during winter, in the angry silences that stretched between the occasional outbursts of her father. Her father, Gerald, had once been a strong man, or so the neighbors said. He had worked construction in his youth, building other people's houses, hammering their walls and pouring their foundations. Now he was a shell of that man, a bitter drunk who slouched in a stained recliner most days, the television blaring something violent or mindless while he sucked the life from a cigarette. His rage simmered beneath the surface, always ready to spill over. He didn't speak to Aisha unless he was yelling. Most days he ignored her altogether, as if her presence was an unwelcome echo in his crumbling life. He never forgave her for being born blind. "You were supposed to be a fresh start," he'd said once, his words slurred from liquor, "and you came out broken." Aisha remembered those words like they were etched into her skin. She was 12 when he'd said them. She didn't cry. Crying had long since become a waste of energy. Instead, she listened, internalized, and kept quiet. There was safety in silence. She rarely left the house, not that there was anywhere to go. The neighborhood kids called her names when she passed. Ghost eyes, white-eyed freak, the cursed girl. Some believed she was born blind because her mother had angered God. Others just didn't want to be around someone who couldn't play games or watch cartoons. Even the local preacher, a man who spoke of salvation and kindness every Sunday, kept his voice strained and distant when he greeted her. He touched her hand like she might infect him. The town, like her house, did not care for people like Aisha. Her world was shaped by routine. In the morning, if Gerald was sober enough, he would toss a can of cold beans or a crust of bread onto the table for her. If he wasn't, she found food herself, if there was any. She memorized the layout of the kitchen, the location of each step and shelf. Her fingers moved with care, measuring distance, weight, and shape. She could tell which cans had labels by the texture of the paper, which ones were expired by their smell. Sometimes at night, when the house fell into a rare moment of silence, she sang softly to herself, songs her mother used to hum. She barely remembered her mother's face, but the songs remained, lullabies in a voice that once held her close. Those nights, Aisha imagined she was somewhere else, a place where hands were gentle and voices kind. She dreamed of baths, warm, full baths with bubbles and scents of lavender, not the freezing splashes she managed in a rusty basin. She dreamed of someone brushing her hair carefully, not yanking through the tangles in anger. She dreamed of someone saying, "I'm glad you're here," even if only once. But dreams were dangerous. They made the silence feel deeper when they ended. One afternoon, the house shifted. Aisha noticed it in the air first, a change in pressure, the scent of cologne she didn't recognize, expensive and foreign. Footsteps, too heavy to be her father's alone, echoed across the thin floorboards. She stood motionless in the hallway, ears sharp. "Is this her?" a man asked. His voice was controlled, low, with a hint of clipped northern cadence. There was no warmth in it, only curiosity. "That's her," Gerald said. "Told you. Nothing wrong with her body, just those eyes." Aisha's stomach clenched. There was a pause. "How old is she?" 17. 18 next month. Another pause, then a sound, a click like a briefcase opening or a box being unlocked. She couldn't be sure. "I want clean records, and no noise. You'll get what you paid for." The voices faded into another room. Aisha's hands trembled, but she made no move. She waited, her back against the wall, every nerve alert. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew in her bones that something terrible had just begun. That night, her father was unusually calm. He didn't yell, he didn't drink. He told her to take a bath and gave her a new dress, cheap, scratchy, but clean. He combed her hair, muttering under his breath. She didn't speak. She couldn't. At dawn, a black car pulled up outside. A man took her hand, firmly, not cruelly, but without asking, and led her down the steps. The ground beneath her feet felt foreign. She didn't hear her father say goodbye. The man opened the car door. Inside, the air was cool, the seats soft. She smelled leather and something faintly floral. The door closed behind her. The engine started. She didn't ask where they were going. It didn't matter. The town slipped away behind them. Aisha didn't look back. She sat in silence as the road stretched on. Miles passed, hours maybe. The man beside her said nothing, and she didn't speak. The hum of the engine and the smooth rhythm of the tires lulled her into a state of numb waiting. Eventually, the car slowed, then stopped. She heard a gate open, then another long drive. When the engine cut, the door beside her opened. She stepped out onto gravel. The air was cooler here, cleaner. Birds chirped. She smelled flowers she couldn't name and grass that was freshly cut. A hand on her elbow guided her forward. The surface underfoot changed, from gravel to smooth stone, then to tile. A cool breeze touched her skin as they entered a building. The space swallowed sound. No creaks, no groans, no angry voices, just soft steps and distant mechanical humming. Everything smelled sterile, like a hospital crossed with a five-star hotel. She was led down a hallway, the walls high and echoing. The floors didn't complain under her feet. She was brought into a room and told to sit. A moment later, a woman's voice, gentle, practiced, welcomed her. Words like safety, care, medical team floated around her. She was told that soon she would see. Aisha didn't ask how, didn't ask why. She only nodded. But deep inside, in that part of her untouched by the world, a quiet voice whispered that this, whatever it was not a gift. It was the beginning of something else. She had never walked on floors that didn't complain beneath her feet. The polished stone beneath Aisha's soles felt so smooth it almost frightened her. She moved cautiously, every step guided by the firm, practiced hand of the woman at her side. There were no uneven boards, no soft spots hiding broken planks. Only silence and echo, an eerie stillness broken only by the muffled clicking of the woman's heels and the distant hum of machinery behind walls she couldn't see. It smelled of citrus cleaner and something sweeter. Jasmine, maybe, or some flower she had never known but recognized by instinct. They had entered the house without ceremony. No greetings, no explanations, just a nod from the driver and the hiss of the automatic doors as they opened to swallow her. The transition from the car to this place was seamless, like stepping from one layer of unreality into another. The woman guiding her introduced herself as Camila. Her voice was smooth, clipped, professional, every syllable measured, but not unkind. She spoke with a rhythm that felt rehearsed. "You'll be comfortable here, Aisha," she said. "Everything has been arranged for your care. There's nothing to worry about." Aisha didn't respond. Her mouth was dry. Her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth like it had forgotten how to form words. Camilla didn't seem to mind the silence. She led her down a hallway that smelled of air freshener and cool metal, then into a room that Aisha assumed was hers. She was gently guided to sit on a bed, her fingertips brushing over silk sheets so soft they barely registered as fabric. A soft breeze touched her face. The air was cool, crisp, controlled. "We'll begin with some assessments today," Camilla continued. "Dr. Ryu will speak with you shortly. He's the best in his field. Your operation is scheduled for tomorrow morning." That word, operation, hung in the air like an unfamiliar chord. Aisha finally found her voice. "What kind of operation?" "Restorative," Camilla said smoothly. "We'll be working to restore your vision. I know it's a lot to take in, but there's a high probability of success. You'll be well looked after. Mr. Miller has ensured you'll receive the most advanced care available." Mr. Miller. The name tasted bitter in Aisha's mouth, the man from the car, the voice that had negotiated her future in the same breath one might use to discuss a business transaction. She had never heard warmth in that voice, only control, precision. Every word he spoke seemed to fit perfectly in place, like gears in a machine too polished to break. "Do I have to?" she asked softly. Camilla hesitated just briefly. "It's what's best for you. After the surgery, everything will change. You'll finally be able to see the world. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" Aisha said nothing. Her hands curled in her lap, trembling. She didn't know what she wanted. The idea of seeing, of being able to look at the sky, the face of a person, a book, her own reflection, had always existed for her like a myth. Something people talked about with awe, but she could never touch. She told herself she didn't care, that the world she built in her mind was enough. But now, suddenly, this possibility was no longer a dream. It was a fact, a certainty placed before her like a meal she'd never ordered. The woman left her alone for a while. Aisha sat still on the bed, letting her hands roam the surface around her. Everything was immaculate, nothing chipped or frayed. The lamp beside the bed had a smooth, cool base of stone or ceramic. The floor beneath her toes was heated. She moved carefully, exploring like a mouse in a glass cage, and found that the walls held no texture, no cracks, nothing to grab onto, no windows, only a vent quietly humming above her. She didn't sleep that night. The lights dimmed automatically, and she lay on her side wrapped in a softness that felt alien. Her mind played tricks, memories and fears twisting together. She heard the echo of her father's voice, taunting her. "You think this is a blessing? Think they gave you this for free?" She imagined him laughing somewhere, drunk and cruel, counting bills with shaking fingers. At dawn, the door opened without a knock. A new voice, male and soft, asked her to come with him. Dr. Ryu. His voice was patient, clinical. He described the procedure as they walked. The optic nerve appears structurally intact, he said. It's rare in congenital blindness. The cortical response is muted but not absent. We believe the brain can adapt. She didn't understand half of what he said, but she nodded. It didn't seem to matter what she said. The river had already carried her past the point of choice. In the operating room, she was laid on a table and surrounded by voices. Everything was smooth and sterile and too quiet. Someone placed a mask over her face, told her to count backwards from 10. She only got to 7. When she woke, she was no longer in the same room. She knew this from the feel of the sheets, the texture of the pillow, the rhythm of the vents. Her head ached. Her eyes, she didn't know how to describe it, burned without pain. They pulsed. She was afraid to open them. "You're safe," a voice said. "Camilla again. You're in recovery. Just rest." She stayed still. Time passed in strange fragments. She drank broth. She slept. Her eyes were sensitive to light, but she could tell that light was there. She sensed movement. Shadows, maybe. It terrified her. On the 3rd day, they removed the bandages. Dr. Ryu spoke gently, guiding her. "Let's open your eyes, slowly. No rush. Just blink. Let the light in." She did. The world arrived like a storm. It wasn't clear, not at first. There were shapes and color, light blurs moving in front of her, the ceiling like a white sky. She gasped, her heart racing. Everything felt too fast, too much. "You're doing well," someone said. A face loomed close, a man's face out of focus with pale skin and light hair. "You're safe." Aisha blinked. The face didn't leave. Slowly, painfully, the details came into focus. Blue eyes, fine lines near the corners, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. Mr. Miller. He looked exactly how she'd imagined him, and nothing like it at all. Cold, beautiful, distant. A piece of art rather than a person. "You can see me now," he said. "Isn't that wonderful?" She didn't know what to say. She nodded. It was all she could do. Her throat was dry again, but not from fear this time, from realization. This man had bought her. He had paid money to possess her, dress her, cut into her body and rearrange the pieces until she fit into whatever vision he had. And now he stood in front of her, smiling as if he'd given her the sun. Later that evening, she was allowed to walk the halls. Camila walked beside her, offering soft praise as Aisha reached out, touched the walls, admired the paintings. Everything was clean and calculated. Even the way the chairs were arranged felt orchestrated. There were no mirrors. She noticed that almost immediately. "Where are the mirrors?" she asked. Camila paused. "We removed them for now, until you're more comfortable. It can be overwhelming to see yourself for the first time." That night, Aisha lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. She could see the shadows of the vent, the patterns in the plaster. Her vision was still blurry, but it sharpened in flashes. Her brain was working overtime to catch up. And still, despite all the light around her, the silence, the perfection, she felt like she was standing inside glass. Beautiful, cold, and breakable. She closed her eyes and whispered a question into the dark. "What am I now?" No one answered. The days that followed her awakening unfolded like a meticulously choreographed performance, every movement of her new life controlled by unseen hands. Aisha began to see more clearly, the world revealing itself to her in slow, deliberate layers. At first, it was light and shadows, a blur of lines and colors that shifted whenever she turned her head. Then came shapes. A chair, a table, a smooth curve of the doorknob beneath her fingers. Finally, detail, the ridged grain of wood, the soft weave of her blanket, the way sunlight filtered through the high, narrow windows and painted slanted patterns across the floor. It should have been beautiful. It should have been miraculous. And at times, it was. When she sat by the wall-length windows in the main parlor and watched the trees sway in the distance, or when she cupped a cup of tea in her hands and saw steam rise from the surface, these were moments she once thought belonged only in other people's lives. But the beauty came with a price, a weight pressing down on her shoulders. With every new thing she saw, she also became more aware of everything she could not reach. She was never alone. Even as her vision improved, there was always someone near, watching, guiding, intervening. Camilla accompanied her on walks through the house, offering soft explanations of what she was seeing, like a docent in a museum. The kitchen, with its rows of gleaming counters and strange machines, was off-limits. The doors that led outside were locked, always, even when the garden was in full view just beyond the glass. When Aisha asked if she could go outside, Camilla would smile gently and say, "Not yet, darling. Soon." The house itself was vast, built like a luxury hotel merged with a sterile clinic. Each hallway was spotless, each room curated. There were no scuffed corners, no uneven carpets, no clutter. Nothing out of place. The house breathed through air vents and sliding doors, through silent staff who drifted from one task to another without acknowledging her unless spoken to. Everything she touched was soft or smooth. Nothing resisted her. And nothing, she realized, truly belonged to her. Her room had no lock. None of the doors did. If she closed one, she would often find it slightly ajar minutes later. Once, she tried shutting herself in the bathroom just to feel what privacy might be like in this new world. And when she emerged, Camilla was standing in the hallway, concern etched into her face like a parent catching a child in mischief. "You don't need to hide here," she said. "There's nothing to be afraid of." But Aisha was afraid. Not of the house itself, or the people, or even the things she didn't yet understand. It was the stillness that unnerved her, the sense that everything she experienced was part of a script she hadn't been allowed to read. She felt like a guest in a place designed for someone else's comfort. She began to test boundaries, quietly. One evening, after dinner, she wandered down a corridor that Camilla usually steered her away from. It was darker than the others, less polished, with doors that looked heavier and older. Before she could explore further, a man in a uniform appeared seemingly from nowhere and asked if she needed help. His smile was polite, but his eyes were hard. She mumbled something about getting lost, and he escorted her back to the main hall without another word. The next morning, Camilla gently reminded her to stick to the designated areas. "For your own safety," she said. Aisha noticed cameras mounted high in the corners of the ceiling. They blended in with the architecture, but once she saw them, she couldn't unsee them. They were in every room but the bathroom. She wondered how long they had been watching her, before the surgery, during it, after, even now. She began to dress with her back to the corners, though it brought no real comfort. Her clothes arrived folded in perfect squares in the wardrobe each morning. They were beautiful. Silks and cottons, elegant cuts, delicate colors. But she had not chosen a single item. Her shoes were all the same brand. Her toiletries were lined up in perfect order on the vanity. One scent of lotion, one kind of shampoo, one toothbrush. Everything predetermined. The mirrors were eventually returned. One morning, she woke to find a full-length mirror mounted on the inside of her closet door. Seeing herself for the first time was more disorienting than she had anticipated. The girl in the mirror had smooth dark skin, high cheekbones, and eyes that still looked slightly off, one pupil narrower than the other, both a pale gray blue from the surgery's aftermath. Her hair had been styled while she slept, braided in tight rows that framed her face. She didn't recognize the person staring back. The image was too clean, too perfect. It felt like she was seeing a doll. When she asked Camilla who had done her hair, the woman only smiled and said, "Our staff takes care of everything." Even her body, it seemed, was not her own. Mr. Miller began to visit her more frequently. Always alone, always unannounced. He would appear at odd times, during breakfast, in the middle of a book she was trying to read, just as she was settling in for the night. His presence unsettled her. He moved through the house like a shadow that belonged there, yet left no trace. He praised her progress, her posture, her speech. "You've adapted beautifully," he said once, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder, "like I knew you would." She wanted to ask him why he had done this, brought her here, paid for the surgery, clothed her, fed her, built this shining, empty world around her. But the words caught in her throat. She feared the answer more than the question itself. And then, one evening, he told her. They were alone in the solarium, the stars visible through the glass ceiling, their light cold and far away. Mr. Miller sat across from her, his fingers laced together, eyes steady. "You've been here for almost 3 weeks," he said. "I think it's time we discussed your future." Aisha felt her stomach tighten. "I've taken care of every detail," he continued. "Your health, your education, your well-being. But all of this is just the beginning." She said nothing. The silence stretched. "You need a place in this world," he said. "A role, and I believe I have one for you." Her pulse quickened. "You'll be protected, respected. You'll want for nothing. And, in return, I ask only for something very simple." He stood and walked toward her, then knelt so that their eyes met. "Marry me." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. She stared at him, her mind unable to comprehend what she had just heard. Her voice failed her. He smiled. "It won't be today. We'll take our time. But I want you to understand where this is going. You are not a ward. You are not a patient. You are something more." He reached for her hand. She pulled it back without thinking. "I need time," she whispered. "Of course," he said, his voice smooth. "You have all the time you need." That night, she didn't sleep. Her vision, though clearer than ever, could not make sense of the images swirling in her mind. The gleam of his smile, the unblinking cameras, the locked doors. She sat at the window and watched the moon shift through the branches of a tree she could never touch. For the first time since her surgery, she wished she were blind again. The air was heavy the morning after Mr. Miller's proposal, though the weather was clear and blue beyond the towering glass windows. The house, as always, was immaculate, the silence within its halls precise and deliberate, as if carefully maintained like the lawn outside. But for Aisha, something had shifted, something intangible and irreversible. She moved through the house that morning with the weight of a stone tethered to her spine. She could not bring herself to look anyone in the eye. Not Camilla, not the cleaning staff, not the cook who quietly placed her breakfast on the table as though delivering a verdict. No one acknowledged what had happened the night before. No one asked if she was all right. Camilla greeted her with her usual warm professionalism and said they had a fitting scheduled after lunch. For what, she didn't say. Aisha didn't ask. The hours that followed passed in a haze of unreality. Aisha felt like she was drifting through someone else's life. The clothes chosen for her that morning, a pale pink blouse with delicate embroidery and cream trousers, were more adult than anything she had worn before, and when she caught her reflection in the full-length mirror, she barely recognized the poised young woman staring back. Her body felt unfamiliar, her posture too still, her eyes too bright. She had the face of someone who had been sculpted rather than raised. The fitting took place in a sunlit room she had never entered before. It was filled with mannequins draped in white cloth, racks of dresses in protective plastic, and 3 seamstresses with calm, focused expressions. A fourth woman, who introduced herself simply as Elise, gestured toward a small platform in the center of the room and invited Aisha to step up. Still too numb to object, Aisha complied. She stood rigidly as they slipped a gown over her shoulders, adjusted the fabric, measured her waist and arms, marked sections of lace to be trimmed or added. The dress was white. Not bright white, but a soft ivory, like the inside of a seashell. It shimmered faintly in the light. She stared at her reflection, her throat tightening. The girl in the mirror looked like a bride. She looked beautiful. But Aisha felt hollow. Elise smiled and said she was a vision. Later, back in her room, Aisha sat on the edge of her bed and tried to breathe through the rising panic that was clawing its way up her chest. She was 17, 18 in 3 months, and she was being fitted for a wedding dress. No one had asked her if she wanted this. No one had explained what came next. It was not a conversation. It was a decision made without her. It was not a gift. It was a claim. She didn't eat lunch. The food was left on a tray near the door and collected untouched an hour later. No one mentioned it. Camilla came by to check on her and noted, almost casually, that Mr. Miller would be dining with her that evening. Aisha nodded without lifting her head. Dinner was served in the east dining room, a smaller, more intimate space than the grand hall where she had eaten before. The table was set for 2, candles flickering in crystal holders, soft piano music playing from hidden speakers in the walls. Mr. Miller entered promptly, dressed in a dark suit, his demeanor as composed as always. He greeted her with a smile and pulled out her chair himself. She sat stiffly. "I know this is a lot," he said after the first course was cleared. "But I want you to understand something, Aisha. This is not a prison. It's a home. You're not a captive. You're chosen." She didn't respond. "I gave you back your sight," he continued. "I gave you comfort, safety, beauty, things you were denied all your life. I didn't do that out of pity. I did it because I saw something in you. Strength, grace, potential." Aisha looked at her plate. The food was artfully arranged, untouched. "I want you beside me," he said, "not because you owe me anything, but because you belong with me." She lifted her eyes to his. There was no malice in them, no overt menace, but neither was there room for dissent. His words were honeyed, but they fell on her shoulders like chains. "I need more time," she said again. "You'll have it," he assured her. "But understand that the wheels are in motion. The world is already being prepared for our union. The announcements will be carefully crafted. No one will question it." Aisha blinked slowly. "Announcements?" He nodded. "People will talk. They always do. But they will only see what we show them. A story of redemption, of transformation. You'll be an inspiration." Her stomach turned. She realized then that he didn't just want her presence, he wanted her image, her silence, her compliance. She was not a bride. She was a brand. That night, she cried in the dark. For the first time in years, she let the sobs come, silent and shaking, curled beneath the sheets in a bed too soft to feel real. No one heard, or if they did, they said nothing. The following days unfolded with a sickening inevitability. There were calls with stylists, photographers, planners. A wardrobe consultant came to meet her and spoke about colors and palettes as if discussing the design of a product. Aisha was asked to pose for portraits. Nothing formal, just natural moments in the garden, the solarium, the library. Camila assured her it was all part of the preparation, that she would thank them later when the world embraced her story. She saw the draft of the press release one morning on Camila's tablet, left open for just long enough to be noticed. It spoke of a philanthropist's act of compassion, the remarkable journey of a blind girl saved from a life of hardship and transformed into a symbol of hope. The word engagement was used 3 times. Aisha stopped speaking for a time. Words felt useless. She moved through the house like a ghost, dressing when told, eating when she could, smiling when prompted. She played the part they had scripted for her, waiting, watching. The staff treated her differently now, not disrespectfully, but with a new formality, a subtle deference, like she was no longer one of them. Some looked at her with pity. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Only the gardener, a quiet man named Marcus who rarely spoke, seemed unchanged. She passed him once near the hedges, and he gave her a brief nod. Nothing more. The wedding date was set for the spring. A quiet ceremony, according to Camila. No press, just the right people. A few guests, all carefully selected. The public announcement would follow later. Aisha knew then she had little time. She began to study the house more carefully, taking note of patterns, of staff rotations, of which doors required key cards and which were monitored. She asked subtle questions, masked as innocent curiosity. She tested the boundaries again, walking a little further than allowed, lingering in places she wasn't meant to be. She found her old clothes in a locked cabinet in a laundry room on the lower floor. They were folded neatly, labeled. She touched the threadbare fabric of her old sweater and felt something sharp inside her unravel. They had preserved the evidence of who she had been, like a relic. That night, Mr. Miller visited her room. He knocked once before entering, not waiting for permission. He handed her a box, a small, velvet-lined container. Inside was a ring, gold with a single diamond that caught the light like a shard of glass. "I thought it was time," he said. Aisha stared at it for a long time before lifting her gaze to his. "I'll wear it," she said. He looked pleased. "But not because I'm ready," she added, "because I know you want me to." He paused, studying her, then he nodded. "I can wait a little longer." He kissed her forehead and left. When the door closed behind him, Aisha sat alone in the silent room and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. And for the first time since arriving in the house, she began to plan how to leave it. The morning after she accepted the ring, Aisha woke to a room saturated with quiet. Outside, the sun was rising in a pale sky, soft light spilling through the tall windows and long bars across the floor. The house was as it always was, pristine, still, heavy with the air of something too carefully designed. But something within Aisha had changed. It was not sudden, not some lightning strike moment of rebellion, but a slow and relentless certainty that had settled into her bones. She could not explain when it began. Perhaps it had always been there, like a seed lying dormant under years of fear and silence. But now it was awake. She sat up in bed, the covers pooling around her waist, the engagement ring catching the early light like a warning. It felt colder than it had the night before. She turned her hand slowly, watching it gleam, and tried to remember the last moment she had truly made a choice for herself. Not one made out of fear or compliance, not one handed to her like a choreographed step in someone else's dance. The realization struck her quietly, without drama. She hadn't made such a choice in years. Breakfast arrived, as it always did, at precisely 7:45. The tray was carried in by a new girl Aisha hadn't seen before. Young, thin, with eyes that flicked nervously around the room, never settling. She placed the tray on the table and turned to leave without a word, but Aisha spoke before she could. "What's your name?" she asked. The girl froze, clearly startled. Then she turned slowly and answered in a voice so soft it nearly vanished into the air. "Layla." Aisha nodded. "Thank you, Layla." The girl's eyes flicked to Aisha's face, as if uncertain how to respond to such acknowledgement. Then she left, and Aisha sat down to eat, her mind already working, connecting the smallest things, the nervous glance, the speed of retreat, the fact that Layla seemed younger and far less trained than the others. Later that morning, during her scheduled walk through the garden, Aisha saw Layla again, this time carrying a basket of linens through the service entrance by the west wing. Aisha slowed her steps, feigning interest in a flowering hedge, and noted how the girl glanced quickly over her shoulder before disappearing through the staff door. It was a detail most would overlook, but Aisha was learning to see more than what was shown. That night, she waited until the house had gone still. The hallways dimmed after 10, and though the staff rotated through their overnight duties, there were predictable moments of absence, gaps in the structure. She counted steps, timing how long it took for one hallway to empty before another was manned. Then, barefoot and silent, she crept down the corridor to the laundry passage, a place she had visited only once before. The door creaked, but not loudly. Inside, the scent of detergent and warm cloth filled her lungs. She moved quickly through rows of shelves until she found a corner that faced away from the security camera tucked high in the ceiling. There, tucked behind a tall hamper, she waited. She didn't wait long. Layla entered carrying a stack of folded towels, her steps quick and quiet. Aisha stood, revealing herself slowly, not wanting to startle her. The girl stopped mid-step, eyes wide. "I need your help," Aisha said. Layla's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked toward the hallway behind her, then back at Aisha. "You're not safe here," Aisha continued, her voice low. "Neither of us are." I can't," Layla stammered, glancing at the camera above. "They don't watch this angle," Aisha said. "I checked." Layla swallowed hard. "You shouldn't be here." "I know, but I need to talk to someone who isn't paid to smile." For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then Layla slowly nodded and whispered, "Come back tomorrow, same time." Aisha slipped back into her room unnoticed. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from something sharper, purpose. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her reflection. The girl in the mirror was changing. The next night, and the one after that, they met again. Layla was hesitant at first, terrified of being caught, but slowly her voice became steadier. She told Aisha she had come from overseas, North Africa, she said, though she never named the country. She had arrived thinking she would be working in a hotel, only to find herself locked into a contract she hadn't signed, her documents taken, her pay withheld. "He finds people who won't be missed," she said. "Like me," Aisha whispered. Over the next few weeks, Aisha learned more. About the secret agreements signed by distant governments, about the shell companies Mr. Miller used to funnel people and money, about the other girls, Some already gone, some kept behind doors she had never seen. Not all had been given new eyes and luxury linens. Some were invisible even within the walls of the estate. She also learned where the records were kept. There was an office, guarded but not inaccessible, where Camilla stored copies of documents, visas, birth certificates, NDAs, all neatly cataloged. Aisha began mapping the house more precisely, memorizing door codes, observing the patterns of when doors were locked and when they were left ajar. Every gesture of compliance earned her more trust. Every smile to Mr. Miller, every obedient nod became a layer of camouflage. Camilla praised her for her progress, for her maturity. "You're glowing," she said one afternoon as Aisha stepped out of a car after a quiet visit to a private clinic. "You've truly blossomed." Aisha smiled. She had learned to smile on command. Later that week, she found the key card left on a side table outside the study. It belonged to one of the newer guards, a man whose name she didn't know. He had been careless just once. She took it, copied the number, and returned it before it was missed. That night, she whispered her plan to Layla. The girl went pale. "They'll kill you if they find out," she said. "Then they'll find out I was never theirs to begin with." Layla hesitated. Then, slowly, she handed Aisha a small flash drive, worn and scratched. "This has everything I could find," she said. "Documents, contracts, even photos. You'll need help to get it out." "I'll get it out," Aisha said. "I just need to get out first." Her chance came 3 nights later. There was a storm. Rain lashed against the windows and the security system entered lockdown mode, focusing on perimeter threats. Inside, the guards' rotations were slower, their patterns disrupted. Aisha slipped out of her room dressed in black, her hair tucked under a scarf. She made her way to the office, unlocked the door with the copied code, and retrieved the files she needed. Her medical records, the fabricated papers, the contracts signed under false names. She made it out to the garden gate where Layla was waiting, the girl's face pale in the glow of lightning. "They'll know," Layla whispered. "Then let them," Aisha said. She climbed into the small maintenance van they had arranged, crouched low as it passed the back checkpoint, and watched through the slats as the estate vanished behind her. She didn't cry. Not yet. Only when they reached the safe house, a run-down apartment an hour outside the city, where a friend of Layla's waited, did she allow herself to exhale. The flash drive was sent to a journalist the next morning, an old reporter with a reputation for chasing uncomfortable truths. It would take time to verify everything, to publish the story. But the process had begun. Aisha sat by a cracked window and stared out at the city lights, distant and blinking. She was alone. She was broke. But for the first time, the life she was living was hers. The rain continued for days after Aisha's escape, as if the sky itself had decided to wash away every trace of the place she had left behind. The small apartment she now occupied smelled of damp walls and something older, the residue of too many lives lived in the same narrow rooms. It was not luxurious. There were no velvet chairs, no curated silence, no polished stone floors, but the creak of the floorboards under her feet was honest. The cold draft that slipped under the door had no malice. The water that dripped from the kitchen faucet was unfiltered but free. It was the first place she had set foot in years that hadn't been chosen for her. The apartment belonged to Soren, a friend of Layla's from her early days in the city. He was middle-aged, wiry, with kind eyes and a cigarette always resting between 2 fingers. He didn't ask questions. He gave Aisha the couch, a key, and his silence. That was enough. She spent the first 2 nights sleeping in clothes she hadn't picked out herself, too exhausted to care. On the 3rd morning, she woke early, washed her face with cold water, and stared into the cracked mirror above the sink. The girl looking back at her was thinner than she remembered. Her eyes, though no longer clouded by blindness, held shadows of a different kind. The flash drive Layla had given her sat like a weight in her pocket. She had stared at it for hours before finding the courage to send it out. She used Soren's ancient computer, disconnected from any cloud services, wrapped the files in layers of encryption with help from an open-source program she barely understood, and composed the email with trembling fingers. She addressed it to a single recipient, Rosalie Keyes, an investigative journalist known for unraveling the corruption behind glossy institutions. Aisha had seen her name once before, back in the house when Camilla had been browsing news articles, and muttered, "That woman again," in a tone mixed with irritation and dread. The message was short, no backstory, just the facts. "My name is Aisha. I was taken. I have proof. If you want the truth, call me." She included a burner number, one she had bought in cash at a gas station on the outskirts of the city. The reply came within 24 hours. "Call me now." Rosalie's voice was sharp, not unkind, but cutting in the way that comes from long years of being lied to. She asked questions fast, too fast at first, and Aisha struggled to keep up. But soon the rhythm settled. She told her everything, not in one breath, but in pieces, like placing shards of broken glass on a table one at a time. Her childhood, her blindness, the way Mr. Miller had come into her life like a storm hidden in a gift box, the house, the surgery, the dress, the ring, the cameras, the contract. She expected disbelief, hesitation, but Rosalie was quiet. "You have no idea," the journalist said finally. "You're not the only one, but you may be the first who got out with proof." The days that followed moved fast. Rosalie flew in with a small team. They took refuge in an anonymous hotel on the edge of the city. They met Aisha under false names and cover stories. They made copies of the files, cross-referenced dates, traced offshore accounts. They verified photos and found patterns in the movements of money, names of girls who had disappeared into silence. By the end of the week, there was no more doubt. The article went live on a Sunday afternoon. The headline was simple: "Inside the Empire, the girl who escaped." Aisha's name was not included at first, nor her face. The piece described the system in place, the trafficking disguised as philanthropy, the manipulation of legal loopholes, the cosmetic surgeries used to rebrand victims, the carefully staged engagements. It mentioned Mr. Miller by name. The response was immediate. Social media erupted. Journalists flooded his foundation with calls. Sponsors began pulling out within hours. By midnight, the front page of every major paper in the country featured some version of the same story. He denied everything. He called the claims a coordinated attack. He painted himself as a misunderstood benefactor. But more voices began to rise. Anonymous accounts, whispers, then names. Women, older now, some still broken, some rebuilt. They told stories too similar to be coincidence. The words changed, but the pattern stayed the same. He found them when they had nothing. He gave them everything. Then he took what he wanted. The authorities acted slower. The machinery of wealth has momentum, and Mr. Miller had spent decades building influence. His lawyers filed for defamation, threatened Rosalie's publication with lawsuits, but the damage was already done. Sponsors pulled out. The board of his foundation resigned. His properties were scrutinized. The FBI opened a case. International organizations began their own investigations. A week after the article dropped, Rosalie called Aisha with a single line. "We did it." But Aisha didn't feel victorious. Not yet. She had to be seen. A few days later, she agreed to an interview. It was filmed in a neutral space. No fancy lighting, no makeup crew. Just a room with white walls and a camera that hummed quietly as it recorded. She sat in a simple chair, hair pulled back, ringless. She began from the beginning. Not the surgery, not the house, but the loneliness, the hunger, the voice of her father telling her she was broken, the touch of her mother's fingers brushing her cheek for the last time. She spoke for nearly 2 hours. No interruptions, no cuts, just the truth, spoken plainly with the kind of strength that only those who've survived the worst can carry in their voice. When the interview aired, the internet exploded again. Her name trended for days. Some praised her bravery, some questioned her motives. Others quietly sent messages of gratitude. I was one of them. One message read, "I thought I was the only one." She read every word. She saved them all. Then, slowly, she stepped out of the storm. She moved into a small apartment in a quieter part of the city. Rosalie's team connected her with legal advisors, therapists, and a foundation willing to sponsor her education. For the first time, she sat in a classroom as a student, not as a story. She wore what she wanted. She cut her hair short. She walked streets where no one stared. Sometimes people recognized her. Sometimes they didn't. She didn't mind either way. One afternoon, while walking through a park just before dusk, she paused on a bench and looked out over a lake, its surface catching the pink light of the setting sun. A boy chased a kite in the distance. A couple sat quietly nearby, hands linked, dogs barked, someone laughed. She didn't cry, but she felt it then, that strange, subtle shift in the body when grief finally loosens its grip. She had been blind once, and for a long time after, she had been caged in the illusion of sight. But now, sitting there in ordinary light, in ordinary air, she saw clearly, and this time it was hers. The seasons turned slowly in the city. Summer faded with dignity, drawing golden lines across the sidewalks before yielding to autumn's cooler hand. Leaves shifted to amber and rust, and a crispness entered the air that made Aisha walk a little faster, hold her coat closed just a little tighter. It had been 6 months since the article had changed everything, since the interview had given her a voice that echoed far beyond the walls of any room she had ever known. And yet, despite the whirlwind of attention, interviews, emails, speeches, and invitations, Aisha had done something that startled even herself. She stepped away. Not out of fear, not from shame, but because she knew that even freedom, when handed in 1,000 different forms, could become its own prison. She had been given the microphone, the spotlight, the label of survivor, and with it had come expectations. Some wanted her to speak endlessly, to give sound bites on morning shows, to wear their causes like dresses. Others wanted her to stay broken, to remain symbolic, digestible, clean. But she was none of those things. She had seen the machine up close. She knew how it worked. And she refused to be used again, even by those who meant well. She rented a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, using the support funds arranged discreetly through Rosalie's legal team. It had 3 rooms and peeling paint, a heater that moaned in protest on cold mornings, and windows that overlooked an alleyway where children played with worn-out balls and sticks. To Aisha, it was perfect. It was hers. She began attending community college under a new name, not as a statement, but as a shield. It gave her peace, and she needed that more than anything. The name she'd chosen, Maya, was one her mother had once whispered, a name she'd said she might have given to a second daughter if there had been time. Aisha held it now like a secret treasure, not to hide who she was, but to protect who she was becoming. Classes were strange at first. She sat in the back of the room, scribbling notes in sharp, angular handwriting, absorbing everything like dry earth drinking in rain. Philosophy, literature, world history, subjects she had never been allowed to think about before. She felt behind, but not broken. She knew what it meant to learn late, to catch up with a world that had always run ahead without her. One professor, a woman in her 40s with fierce intelligence and quiet compassion, took a particular interest in her. She never asked questions about Aisha's past, but always encouraged her to speak, to write, to push deeper. One day after class, the professor placed a slim book in Aisha's hands. It was a collection of essays titled Voices from Below. "Read this," she said. "You don't have to agree with it. Just let it meet you." Aisha read it that night, sitting at her kitchen table with a mug of tea and the single lamp she had bought at a thrift store. The essays were sharp, raw, unapologetic. They spoke of identity, silence, resistance, and visibility. One passage in particular stood out. It read, "We are not what was done to us. We are what we choose to become afterward." She underlined it in pencil, then wrote the sentence on a sticky note and pressed it to the wall above her desk. Outside of class, she began volunteering with a small nonprofit that supported girls transitioning out of institutional foster care. She didn't tell them her story at first. She just showed up, helped sort clothes, organize schedules, made tea for the girls who came in and didn't know where else to go. Some of them were younger than she had been when it all started. Some were older, with eyes that had already closed against the world. In them, she saw herself, not as she had been in Mr. Miller's house, but before that, in the years of gray walls and cold mornings when silence had been her closest companion. Eventually, she told her story, not all at once, not with dramatics, just enough to show them she understood, that she had been unseen too, that she had also once been told she was unworthy of choice. They listened, and when they did, their expressions changed, not with pity, but with recognition. It was through one of the girls, Kayla, a 17-year-old with stormy eyes and a sharp tongue, that Aisha came to speak at the university. Kayla had insisted, saying the faculty needed to hear what the world really looks like. Aisha stood at the front of the hall wearing a plain gray sweater and jeans. Her hair was shorter now, curls free and soft around her face. She didn't bring notes. She didn't need them. She spoke of systems that pretend to care, of people who wear kindness like armor and use it to control. She spoke of power disguised as love, of voices lost in silence, and of what it meant to be seen only when you're suffering. But she also spoke of strength, of how survival is not a miracle but a process, of how freedom isn't given, it's built, brick by brick, decision by decision, even if your hands shake the whole time. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then a hand went up. A young woman in the back asked, "How did you learn to trust yourself again?" Aisha paused. "I didn't," she said. "Not all at once. I made small choices. I listened to the parts of me that had been told to shut up for too long. And when I made mistakes, and I made many, I reminded myself that it's okay not to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect to be free." Applause rose, soft at first, then louder. That night, she walked home through the early spring air. The trees had begun to bloom, fragile petals opening toward the sky. A child ran past her on the sidewalk, laughing, followed by a woman who might have been her mother. Their joy wasn't loud. It didn't demand attention, but it filled the air like music. She stopped by the corner store to buy bread. The cashier, a teenager with braces and chipped nail polish, smiled at her and asked how her day was. It was good, Aisha said, and meant it. When she returned home, she set down her bag and made a simple dinner: lentils, rice, roasted vegetables. She ate slowly, letting each bite remind her she was here, now, in this moment. Afterward, she sat at her desk and opened her notebook. She didn't write her past, she wrote beginnings. New characters, new stories, not about cages, but about climbing, about curiosity, about wind through open windows. She looked up once at the sticky note still pinned to the wall. We are not what was done to us. We are what we choose to become afterward. Then she glanced at the mirror across the room. Her reflection looked back, steady, whole, eyes clear. She smiled, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to escape anything. She was simply living. And this, she thought, was what it meant to see. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more. Check out the next video or explore others on the channel. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them.